Hi, I am Leigh Holbrook from OneHome Collective. I'm the founder and director. We hope you enjoyed the film. This is my friend Abbas.
Abbas Barzegar here with Ebrik Coffee Room in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're trying to disrupt the normal coffee industry in the United States, from your Starbucks to your snobby coffee roastery, and kind of bring it down to everyday people. And we want to tell you a little bit about what that looks like on our side.
We have partnered together to do some really great work, which we're going to lead you through. But we have seen a little bit from that film what it's like for the producers and for Capeltique, which you can see here, and how they changed the game around coffee. There's so many people working to figure out what are ways to create a more just and fair value chain from producer to consumer, from field to cup.
So we start off with a green coffee bean, and as you saw in the film, there are a number of different stages to get us to this green bean. And what we do is make sure that that bean looks good, that it is clean, and that it doesn't have irregularities, that it's processed and curated in a kind of balanced way, so that when we come to roast it, the consumer gets the best possible blend of those beans. And so the very first stage of dropping the bean depends upon making sure that you have the right temperature in place. That temperature is going to be calibrated for things like the elevation at which the green bean or the bean was grown at to begin with. It's going to be calibrated for the elevation at which you are roasting, the ambient temperature in the room that you're roasting, the humidity levels of the day should be at. So we drop that bean and we wait about 2 to 3 minutes, and you move from a green color to a kind of hay, light brown, almost yellowish kind of color, and you can begin to smell the difference. And again, you want to make sure that all of the beans are moving in the roast at the right pace and at the same time, so that we have a kind of healthy balance there. So you have to pay attention to the fan speed, you have to pay attention to the drum speed, and what we are waiting for is something that we call first crack. And first crack is where all the magic happens. You hear on the coffee machine something similar to popcorn popping in your microwave. You hear this rapid succession that takes anywhere from about 45 seconds to 60 seconds of all of the beans literally cracking, and there are internal molecules inside the coffee bean, the fibers themselves, that literally heat up, expand, and then pop. And that popping allows the extraction of coffee to take place. Prior to that moment, your coffee can't be extracted with normal hot water. If you want to make coffee out of the green bean or the yellow bean, you can, and you just have to boil it. It takes a long time. And actually, the Bedouins in Arabia, they're really specialized in this. They make a remarkable yellow coffee. And so after the first crack, this is where the magic happens. You have to spend some time calibrating your wind speeds and your temperature in that first crack. And so we actually have computers that measure that temperature for us to make sure that we're moving along this roast profile in the right direction, and there isn't any kind of serious problems taking place in fluctuations of the temperature, because even those microscopic fluctuations will have an impact on the taste of the bean. And then you drop it, and we have a kind of rapid cooling system. There's a cooling tray in there because the heat of the bean will continue it cooking, so we want to bring down that temperature as quickly as possible. And so that takes about another 3-4 minutes. And we cup it then in order to taste some of the elements and the roast profile of the actual bean. But we really don't recommend drinking it until about day 4 or 5. And the sweet spot for coffee, somewhere between that sort of 4th, 5th day to about 2 weeks, right? And that's kind of what we would recommend.
I started OneHome Collective, the idea that we were going to be bridge building. We were going to be creating connections between communities. We were going to focus on social justice and small ways that we could all impact the world around us. But I didn't know exactly what I was doing. And then I was introduced just to a friend of a friend to Capeltique Coffee. And I was like, this is great. I love their story. I want to sell Capeltique Coffee. We're going to do this as part of OneHome. We're going to help promote this organization. And so when I reached out, the response I got was, that sounds great. We do friendship before business. You need to come get to know us in Mexico and visit us before you work with us in our coffee. So I was like, great. So a couple of friends and I booked 10 days to go down to Mexico City, and we had to go to Mexico City and Chiapas. So we went through Mexico City and saw the cafes and saw the satellite office of Capeltique, met some people at the university who were involved in building it. Then we flew another flight down to Tuxtla, which is down in southern Chiapas, and then took this 1987 Mitsubishi. 4 of us crammed into into this taxi on a 4-hour excursion down to Bachajon down to the villages, to the small towns where the coffee plant is and where the growers are centralized. And, I spent 10 days there, and then at the end of those 10 days realized I have so much more to learn. There's a story so much bigger here than just coffee, than just, an alternative economy. There was so much more to this story into the community. So I came back, basically sold everything and moved to Mexico. I was like, well, I checked in with my daughter. I'm like, how would you feel if I moved to Mexico? She's like, go for it, Mom.
That's awesome.
She's
That's
like,
great.
I think secretly she was thinking, well, this will keep her from coming to visit me at college.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did. I sold everything and moved down there with the intention of learning from them and finding a way to participate with this organization. I was like, OneHome has, I think that we want to build a relationship with this community. And coffee became a real interest for me, and the reality of coffee. So it was a crash course in their reality. The reality of poverty, the reality of exploitation, just the coffee industry as a whole. It was a crash course. It was when I really started to understand where my coffee came from, to a point of actually going out to spend days at a time in these smaller villages and towns with producers and going to their farms. And so I ended up staying there, and I just wanted to participate in some way to help further their mission. So I started telling their story because I had a background with development and fundraising. So I began traveling with OneHome as a OneHome extension. That was our relationship to tell their story.
I see.
After talking to you, we've started this sort of friendship, this relationship, or partnership that, we want to help build bridges between producers, roasters, consumers. So I'm all about, education, getting people to ask, where does that cup of coffee come from?
That's awesome. Yeah.
I loved the form of collaboration I learned down there. It's a true democratic collaboration. The idea is that everyone comes to the table with something. And what can we create out of all of our different gifts? And so it's not this, we're going to go fix somebody else's problems. We're going to go tell somebody what's best for them. It's let's see what we can all create that's beautiful, right? What can we bring to the table? Just because of where I was born and the family I grew up with, I had the privilege of an education, of a certain level of education at a university system. It's a different kind of education than these coffee producers have. They can do things that I can't even keep my succulents alive, right? Much less grow something, right? They have incredible skill at making these, and they have such pride in this beautiful craft of growing and cultivating these plants, and they've been doing it for generations, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like we all come to the table with these different ideas. And
I
so
kill
OneHome
a bonsai tree every year.
right?
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. I was really proud for us to be able to do the gift packages that we did for the holiday season, and so I'm hoping that we could do that again, where we can do a bag of Capotique and a bag of Ebrik together, and people can really understand the value chain back home, and then also support small businesses in the United States. Because it's interesting, that coffee originally in the United States was roasted by your neighborhood grocer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, every neighborhood grocer had a small roastery.
Yeah.
And everybody had really high quality coffee, and they just got it at their neighborhood grocery store, and they used to sell it in paper bags, right? And then the industry took over, and smart capitalists, so to speak, quote unquote, smart, took over, and what they ended up doing is they sort of industrialized the supply chain in such a way to make it unfeasible. What's interesting now is that we're going back to the neighborhood roaster.
Yeah.
And if you go to other parts of the world, most places in the world, in the Middle East, for example, you go to the local roaster. You buy your coffee, and you select your blends. You make your own blends.
Yeah.
And the roaster has a couple of different roasting machines, and it's not even that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping to be part of a revolution where coffee comes back home. I'm really confident that the consumer of today and tomorrow will help us get there, because at this point, our consumers are looking into the ingredients in their foods. Do you know what I mean? There's a move towards sort of sustainable work, healthier work. Yeah. Our kids know what kind of plastics are good and bad plastics now. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So to know where your coffee comes from, and to make sure that you're not contributing to the exploitation of whole communities and whole livelihoods, right? Because people want to extract a couple extra cents out of a pound of coffee. Yeah. To know that you can make a difference in people's lives simply by knowing where your coffee comes from is a major movement. I'm confident our consumers will get there. So thank you again for teaching me about all of this. And I'm really excited about the journey.
Absolutely. We want to show you a little bit about what it's like also for roasters here in the United States, like Abbas.
I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what a normal cup of coffee looks like, and why we care so much about origin and about the production line, the value chain, and everything like that. So I'm going to start basically where the coffee starts on our side. We get green coffee. We import green coffee just like this. A lot of folks didn't know, but you know now, that coffee comes in the form of a cherry. This is the seed of a cherry. We receive it after import from other parts of the world as a green bean. We roast it at various temperatures depending on the altitude where the coffee was grown, the size of the coffee, the weight of the coffee, the volume that you're roasting that particular moment. And we also, have to pay attention to things like temperature, fan speed, drum speed, all of those different things to get you a properly roasted cup of coffee. Now, these coffee beans right here would be considered darker coffee beans. These beans, incidentally, are from Chiapas, Mexico. I can't claim that they are from Capultique, but there's a very similar region. These are a little bit larger bean, a little bit more expanded, and very rich color there you see. This is right before we would get to, let's say, a dark roast that everybody else is used to drinking around the world. This is either a full medium or just a kind of first stage of a dark roast there. At Ebrik Coffee Room, what we've always tried to do is make sure our doors are open to everybody that comes through to drink coffee. So we were located in the heart of downtown Atlanta. And frankly, a lot of people in the specialty industry coffee scene told me folks in downtown Atlanta don't drink specialty coffee. And I didn't think that was true. I believe everybody deserves the best cup of coffee possible. And that if people are introduced to something other than gas station coffee, they're going to enjoy it. And so what I'm doing today is basically the kind of educational tour that I would do for most of my customers. And what we found is that once people realize where their coffee came from, how to make it properly, and how to understand it a little bit in terms of what they're tasting, immediately they started appreciating all of it together, right? And they started experiencing coffee a little bit differently. And for us, our motto at Ebrik Coffee was always, and is always, community, comfort, culture. And for us, knowing about your coffee is just as important as tasting it, because to know it knows what community you're connected to, knows what kind of value chain it came from. It, you really take the kind of pride in your cup, and it's something that you do every single day. And so there's something really encouraging about that whole process. So I'm going to start off with our contraption here. Now, again, to try to make coffee accessible for everybody, I don't want you to think that you have to have all of this equipment. However, you can invest in a small pour over, and pour overs can range from plastics, ceramics to glass. They can range from $4.50 all the way up to $50, right? But go ahead and invest in a small pour over, and you can use whatever normal mug you use. But what this does is it basically gives us more control over the drip and extraction process. And so the technology here, or the logic of extraction for this cup of coffee, is very similar to what you're used to drinking in the old school drip coffee machines that we've all had, that our grandparents had, right?
Yeah.
That aren't as popular anymore, but frankly, still make an excellent cup of coffee. And so all this is one step up from that, and gives us a little bit of control. So what I'm going to do is really stress this point, is that measurements actually matter. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff that doesn't matter in coffee that gets hyped up, but I will say that measurements actually matter. I have a scale here in order to measure out my coffee, but before I tell you the sort of ratios of grams to water and all that kind of stuff, I'm just going to tell you, for a normal cup of coffee, just a normal mug of coffee, this is like an actual medium cup of coffee, not a big old Texas-sized coffee, and not your Ventes and Grandes and all that kind of stuff, but something that's right around 10 ounces, okay, 8 to 10 ounces, 2 heaping scoops of coffee ground at this kind of coarser sand level are going to be sufficient for you. So I'm just going to go just a little bit more than 2. And what that does is it gets us to, if you're taking notes, about 15 grams of coffee, okay? 15 grams of coffee is going to be just the right amount of coffee that you need, again, for your 8 to 10 ounce cup. But part of the joy of a pour over, which in our cafe, when we had our cafes open, pre-pandemic, we used to call this the patience, because you have to really sort of sit with it, and you have to be patient as this thing is extracted. But part of the magic is actually playing with those ratios, to grind levels, to sort of extraction times and bean origins, and actually just kind of working through those different levels of ratios of your coffee, so that you can really understand what that bean is all about. So I need to get the hot water. And again, this is going to be, thank you, sir. This is going to be something that's maybe a little over the top. We don't necessarily have to have a gooseneck kettle, But a gooseneck kettle actually helps with the pour over process. You can use any boiling water, you can use any kind of teapot, nozzle, or anything like that, and you can find these for variable prices as well. Again, don't get too intimidated by the gooseneck kettle, but it does help. And the reason it helps is because it allows you to actually pour on the grinds a little bit more exactly. And so I'm going to ask that you come in just a moment here to take a look at this first step. What we are doing here is called the bloom. The bloom is the first pour over. We start from the center of the cup, work outwards, trying to avoid the filter, and just pour enough to get the coffee wet. Just enough to get it wet. And the way this was described to me was that basically you open the door to the extraction process by wetting it first. What happens is nitrogens are released from the coffee bean, and what happens in that moment is that it's released and it opens up the molecules inside of the coffee bean for extraction. So the water gets a cleaner, more direct extract after the bloom. We call it the bloom also because that's where you get to see the freshness of the cup. Now, you're not going to see this in your Starbucks cup. You're not going to see this in your gas station, but if you basically look, you see a really rich, light brown foam exuding from this pour. That demonstrates how freshly roasted the coffee is. And it also kind of tells you a little bit about the health, and you can smell the coffee right at that moment, and you start to understand the taste profile that's about to come to you. Today we're drinking an Ethiopian Yirgacheffe, and after the bloom and after that first pour, you can then just wait for it to go down, again working from the center in a rotating manner and going out. Every coffee bean is going to be needed to be grinded at a different level for the pour over. Some do better coarser, some do better a little finer. But for the most part, what you want is something that's got a smooth, balanced, very fluid drip process. Not too fast, not too slow. Again, this comes down to your taste. You don't have to have a scale because I already told you the gram measurements and whatnot are enough. You don't have to kind of overthink this. But a scale helps once you really get into it. And so you take about 2 minutes or so to get this coffee right.
What I love about pour overs is this was my first introduction to good
really?
coffee.
Really?
Yeah. Before this, it was always, and the pots are fine, but like it was the, Folgers on, the programmed brew in my parents' kitchen, right? And it was fine, like it was coffee. But I was working out of a coffee shop because I was kind of working from home. And I started watching these baristas in their downtime, and they were playing with pour overs and time and espresso and all of the stuff behind it. And I was like, this is so much more than the Black & Decker, right? That's sitting in my parents' kitchen. But this was my first introduction to being able to do it myself, which is what I loved because, all of the profiles and everything else, but this is the first time I sat and I watched the bloom on a coffee.
Oh, okay.
Right, so that was really cool.
That's
and
good.
learned that was how fresh it was. It was. This is one of my favorite ways of doing coffee.
Yeah, mine too. I like it too. There's something real kind of meditative and mindful about being able to make coffee this way. But I'll just, to knock on the snobby coffee folks real quick. I was in this snobby coffee shop recently, and they had an automatic pour over.
Aww.
That was $10,000, and it's a drip coffee machine, right?
Yeah.
It's the same technology, but you could calibrate the water levels, and to be fair, you could calibrate the water level just a little bit more precisely than you would in your $15 Black & Decker.
Yeah.
But what that tells me is that there's something wrong with the consumer side of this.
Yeah.
Where, we're expected to spend an odd amount of money. It's not even just a lot of money. It's just an odd usage of money to try to get the perfect cup out there.
Yeah.
Where millions and millions of people around the world are enjoying this beverage, but for some reason, we've taken it upon ourselves in certain parts of the world to really fetishize over this, where I think the real attention should be on the production line, the process, the community of folks that come together around a cup of coffee. So it's always just been a really interesting space for me to kind of watch.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and pull this out. And what you may have seen me do just a second ago is that sometimes if the coffee's a little bit too fine on the grind, you can take a spoon or a small stick and you can kind of stir it around just a little bit. And what that does is it kind of just helps break up the solidity of how it's getting packed in there. You also have to make sure that your coffee filter, it matches your pour over. There are flatbed pour overs. There are cone pour overs. There's sort of the triangle kind of pour over tip, right? So some of them are cone points. They're flats. There's kind of angled. So a lot of different things, and it does matter what filter you use, mostly for that extraction time.
What do you know about I've seen a lot of pour overs that don't have filters at all. They're like the filterless pour overs that are like stainless.
Yeah, so they're just metal extraction.
Yeah.
So
is your experience with them pretty good?
So the difference there is that a metal extraction pour over is going to be similar to the concept of a French press or even an espresso, where you have minimal filtration of the coffee oils. Paper filtration systems retain oils. They take some of the oils out of the coffee. The metal doesn't. So you can actually have you can have those pour overs that are metal, and you can have some that are filtered. You can try the same coffee on both sides, and you can taste a different profile, right? And that's one of the major differences between like a French press and a pour over.
Yeah, you get the sediment and a little bit of the oils because it doesn't catch it in the
exactly.
Okay,
And that's why an espresso is a very rich, oily type of.
Yeah, this looks amazing. Do I
So
get
there you go.
to
That's
dig into this?
That's all you. Yep.
All right, so this is the Ethiopian Yirgacheffe.
Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. I'm going to set this to boil again.
Oh gosh, this makes me so happy. It's such a good cup of coffee.
You can enjoy the highest quality luxury coffee in the world for $5 or $6 a cup. When you think about that compared to let's say wine or like any other kind of high-end product, you know what I mean? Like a consumer product. It's hard to sort of have that within reach. I mean, you can pay thousands of dollars for truffles, for God's sakes. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For a type of fungus, right? But coffee, you can actually taste the best stuff in the world for $6-7 a cup if you buy it yourself and you grind it yourself.
Yeah.
And so some people might think it's outrageous that there are these really expensive coffees out there. And for the most part, sometimes I think it's unnecessary. But other times, the fact of the matter is that a lot of work went into the irrigation systems to grow that coffee. It was picked properly. It was processed properly. And now, our audience has seen that, $6, they've seen the film, so they know what goes into it. So we should also recognize that it is a tremendous luxury and privilege to just have a $2 cup of coffee. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. We should be spending $6 a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
And if you really think about where it comes from and how it's all coming together, then it justifies it.
Yeah, there's a quote in the film. A guy said, if you know the coffee industry and where coffee comes from, you shouldn't be worried about the $6 cup of coffee. You should be worried about the $1 cup of coffee, because if you know where it's coming from and what it took to get there, a $1 cup of coffee, somebody's getting screwed.
Yeah.
The realization of what it takes, not just for that coffee to be grown, so it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years for the berries to bloom on a plant, for you to get any fruit from a coffee plant. It has to be harvested by hand because they all ripen at different times. Then it has to be shelled, it has to be washed, it has to be sun-dried for 7 days. And then it has to be packaged, it has to be taken to that first stage. In our case, at Capeltica, it was the roasting house, and it would be roasted at the plant. But then it has to go through all these intermediaries before it ever gets to you. Yeah. Before it ever gets to you, or even to the roaster, or to the market that it's going into. And so all of that effort, and it's interesting because the commodities market sets the prices for a pound of raw coffee, and it can, I think, when it closed a few days ago, when I saw it, it was like $1.03 or something like that a pound. If you take all the 9 intermediaries all the way back to the producer. So between all of the work it takes to produce the coffee, to create it, to ship it, to get it to the U.S. market, then it's worth $1.03 a pound. Yeah. So imagine all the cuts that are taken off. So these producers are getting, I don't know, on a good day, 25 cents for a pound of coffee that they've put all of that work into. But then a roasted bag of coffee will sell from $8 to $15. So you get $1 to $1.20 for a pound of raw coffee. And then it roasts, it's a finished product, and it sells for $8 to $15, and then you can get $120 of lattes out of a bag of roasted coffee. So just like seeing that discrepancy, the economic discrepancy in the value chain, and that was, when I started asking about the cup of coffee, where it comes from, saw the journey, saw how much it took to get there, and that my friends taught me down in Chiapas, like learning from them was incredible. Learning their reality as producers was just profoundly impactful. So Abbas, tell us a little bit about Ebrik and how you got into coffee.
My venture into coffee actually goes back to Boulder, Colorado, and so it's a love story. I'm actually an academic by profession, and I was a graduate student and kind of graduate and undergraduate student in Boulder, Colorado, and I spent most of my time, like a lot of students do, in coffee shops.
Yeah.
And so my first love of coffee was born on the hill in Boulder. There was a shop there called Buchanan's. It's not called Buchanan's anymore, but the Trident is still there. And so the Trident is this wonderful coffee shop. Shout out to the Trident. They have wonderful coffee attached to a bookstore. And so I used to live in that coffee shop. I proposed to my wife in that coffee shop, right? And so literally like that became the place where I fell in love with coffee. But what I really loved about it was the fact that it was a community space. It was a space of intellectual curiosity, intellectual growth. It was the closest thing I had to family in my college town. And I began to learn about coffee. So then I came to Emory University here in Atlanta. And again, I just found the closest coffee shop. And it happened to have a roaster inside of it. And so Atlanta Coffee Roaster became the place where I was doing all of my work. And I was studying and reading hours and hours upon pages of pages and whatnot. And I would take breaks every couple hours and walk to the back. And the owner of the coffee shop would teach me about coffee. And so, like every graduate student out there and every professor out there, their dream in life is to have a cafe, right? Like this is just what you love because it embodies the spirit of the original Mediterranean cafe. Coffee came to the world from Ethiopia and Yemen to Istanbul, Syria, and then into the Mediterranean. And the Mediterranean cafe that we all know in Italy and France and others is the home of intellectual growth, of revolutions, of social movements, of consciousness, of philosophy, of art. And so to own a coffee shop and to be in the coffee business is, again, every professor's dream. So I happened to be privileged enough to get a position at Georgia State University in downtown Atlanta, and a college that served overwhelmingly students of color, first-generation students, did not have an independent specialty coffee shop. It just didn't make sense to me that the entire downtown area did not have a coffee shop. And again, people didn't think that people at Georgia State would like a cup of coffee. And so I said, no, that's nonsense. And so with some family and friends, we put together the dream package. And we said, look, let's do this thing. Let's take a risk. Rent at that time was affordable, and it seemed like a great opportunity. And so we came up with this name, Ebrik, which is also called a jezwa, or a rekwe, which is the thing that people make Turkish coffee with. I can't believe we don't have one today.
Oh, yeah.
I should have brought one. But it's basically the kind of long wooden ladle with the fat pot, and that's what you make Turkish coffee with. That's called an Ebrik in a lot of places.
Okay.
I changed the I to an E. It's transliteration anyway, so we called it Ebrik. But again, to harken back to the spirit of the original Mediterranean cafe, community, comfort, culture. And so for us, the community is the first space, the comfort is the cup of coffee, and the culture. If your coffee shop isn't producing culture, like the Trident was, okay, and if it's not holding spoken words and artist talks, and people can't have their community organizing there, and they can't do, book talks there, then it's not a cafe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can jump in and grab a cup of coffee anywhere else in the world that you want. You know what I mean? But the true Mediterranean cafe has all of these principles in it. And so what we've tried to do all these years is really, really focus on building that kind of culture.
Yeah. My first experience with Ebrik was at State. When I was a student there, as soon as Ebrik opened, I was always there studying. I was always there writing my papers, and anytime I had to meet with other students or professors, we always met there. Yeah. And I didn't make the connection because I knew you at the university. You were in my department.
I was teaching, yeah.
But I didn't realize you owned Ebrik. For somehow I didn't make the connection.
Well, it was kind of a secret at the time.
Yeah. Okay.
This isn't too bad, huh?
This is really good. This is an incredible one. So, I know that the building at State ended up closing around the pandemic. How have you guys managed through, I know you've been changing things a lot.
Yeah, so look, the pandemic hit, and we had to make a really hard decision to exit permanently. At that time in March, the landlords approached us and gave us an exit offer frankly, the business had been struggling because although we were the first independent coffee shop on campus, other people realized that was an opportunity, and within 3 years, literally every 6 months, a new coffee shop within half a mile would open. And it brings you to this point of gentrification. Commercial gentrification is a thing. I can't compete against Starbucks that opens up a block away, and I can't blame students and faculty if they got a better location on the walkway than I did. And so as much of support and loyalty we had from our community, people don't realize how much of a toll it takes on a small business. And I can't compete. I can't stay open for 9 months in a pandemic. But what we did is we really pledged to stay open and keep the brand alive. And so what we did is we made a really hard, fast decision to close down our major operations. We had another location as well. We shut down those locations, transitioned to an online e-commerce space, but we tried to really, really focus in on, we're not just selling you coffee. On our platform, through our website, through our blogs, and through our social media channels, we're trying to recreate what that cafe experience is all about, but in this digital space. So we will do DJ sessions, on Sunday mornings where we have a guest DJ come in, Instagram Live, we drink coffee together, we talk. Every time there's a political occasion, we're having that conversation. Basically, if it was going to happen in the business, in the actual physical coffee shop, we're going to recreate it somehow digitally. We even created a Spotify list, a track list, so that people could recreate the vibe of the shop, at home with them. And so we've really tried to do that. But of course, as an e-commerce business, you have to be sort of thinking about business. Yeah. What it's allowed us to do is really focus in on the roasting side of the operation. We've been roasting for about a year on our own, but we've been mostly focused on our coffee shops. Now we're focused on bringing coffee out to folks. What it allows us to do is think about the supply chain more. It allows us to invest the time and energy to really build out those intentions as a business. And so we're super excited to be able to kind of work with you on these issues of solidarity economics. I'm really interested in issues of international development, poverty alleviation, and basically community-led initiatives for social and political empowerment. And what we find is in coffee, the second most traded commodity around the world, coffee touches so many people around the planet. And people who have been very intentional about using coffee as a development and social empowerment tool have been able to radically transform communities on the ground. And it goes way beyond conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism, I would say, all kudos to movements like fair trade, okay? Yeah. But fair trade also creates a structure and an obstacle for people to access. And what the research has actually shown, a review of fair trade coffee initiatives over the last 20 years, has shown that people that are managing fair trade operations tend to do pretty well. Yeah. But has it actually delivered poverty alleviation mechanism? Has it actually empowered people on the ground? No. The research shows that it doesn't.
Not enough, at least.
Right?
Yeah, it's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
A Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's perfect. And so what we are interested in doing is just taking a little bit of time out of our planning process and out of our business strategy to say, we're only going to buy coffee, come spring 2021, the new year, because a lot of cultures around the world calculate the new year at spring every year instead of just, randomly at the end of December in the middle of winter. So what we're planning on doing is that the first day of spring, our goal is by the first day of spring, all of our coffee will be supplied. The only coffee that we'll ever work with are coffee programs that are invested in actual social, political development, economic development, and move beyond fair trade, that have some level of sustainability that is not simply measured by the price point on a pound of coffee, but what are the suppliers or the co-op, what are they doing on the ground to prove to us as suppliers and importers that the coffee we're buying is actually changing people's lives on the ground. And so we have our own internal measurements about sort of what we're looking for, but for the most part, these are development aid goals that are going to be facilitated by coffee. And so our Colombian coffee, our Chiapas coffee, Capultic is a perfect example, our Ethiopian coffee, Tanzanian coffee, Yemeni coffee, these are only coffees that are going to change people's lives. And what we're trying to do is bring that value to our consumers. Because frankly, in my coffee shop, we didn't want certain kinds of customers. I'll be perfectly frank about it. Yeah. If you were the over-the-top snobby barista, you weren't going to get a job at our spot, right? We didn't want that kind of energy. We wanted community. and culture front and center
Yeah.
in the process. So the same thing, if you're going to come to our shop, you can go to 1,000 places to buy a coffee subscription online, but you're going to come to our shop to know that the 5, 6, 10 coffees you can choose from are all coffees that go all the way back to origin, that are designed to demonstrate solidarity with those that have been disenfranchised for generations by our modern capital structures.
You know, for the producers, it's about access, and in Ebrik, it's about access for everybody to good coffee, and good coffee that makes change, right? That creates change. You're interested when you told me about the social solidarity supply chain pledge, like that you all were shifting to buying from producers who are part of economic cooperatives that are about creating real social transformation, about ending poverty, about justice in the industry. That just made me so excited.
Our cafe, I would walk in one day and see the mayor of Atlanta sitting in the back, a councilman sitting in the back, and actually like
John Lewis was there at one point, which made me
John,
made my heart
John
so
Lewis,
happy.
Stacey Abrams' campaign reached out to us and said, can we host some events there? We had regular, kind of activity, but you would have these figures that were senior figures in the city's administration, and at the same time, everybody in the neighborhood knew that the unhoused were treated with dignity and respect, because we had a lot of very high unhoused population around us.
Yeah.
And everybody knew that if somebody who was unhoused and needed a drink of water and maybe a small snack, that they would be treated with respect and dignity, from our customers to our workers, everybody in the business. One time, there was a customer that was treating somebody really poorly, and I kicked the customer out. And so it's really about being intentional and grateful for these opportunities that we have, and being deliberate about the business decisions that we make. So thank you again, Leigh, so much for this opportunity. I look forward to all the great things I can learn from you, and the great things that we're going to do together.